A new kind of threat. November 1944. As winter gripped the Pacific Northwest, an invisible storm began drifting across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a storm unlike any America had ever faced. It was not planes with roaring engines, nor battleships bristling with guns. It was something lighter than air, something seemingly harmless. Japan had launched the first of what would become a terrifying and unusual campaign, the Fugo, or fire balloons. These were not ordinary bombs. They were hydrogen-filled paper balloons, each about 33 feet in diameter, equipped with incendiary devices and anti-personnel bombs. By design, they were silent, carried by the jet stream across nearly 5,000 miles of ocean, and aimed at the western United States. Their mission was as audacious as it was terrifying: to ignite massive forest fires, to terrorize civilians, and to divert U.S. military resources from the Pacific front. The science of the balloon. The engineering behind the Fugo balloons was a testament to Japanese ingenuity under pressure. By late 1944, Japan's industrial base was crippled by Allied bombing raids. Conventional weapons production was faltering. The balloon bombs were a solution born of desperation and innovation. Each balloon used paper shells reinforced with bamboo and hydrogen gas for lift. They were guided not by pilot or rudder, but by nature itself, the jet stream, a fast-moving river of air high above the Pacific, capable of carrying the balloons from Japan to North America in 3 to 4 days. Inside each balloon were 4 incendiary bombs designed to start fires in forests, crops, and cities, along with 1 anti-personnel bomb capable of killing or injuring anyone nearby. Each balloon also included a sophisticated altimeter system, which regulated the balloon's altitude by dropping sandbags as it lost lift, keeping it afloat within the jet stream until reaching its target. In theory, the design was elegant. The balloons required no pilot, no fuel for engines, no direct guidance, yet the journey across the Pacific was fraught with hazards. Storms could tear them apart, lightning could ignite them prematurely, and the sheer vastness of the ocean meant that very few would ever reach North America. Yet despite the odds, 9,300 balloons were launched between November 1944 and April 1945. First sightings. The first signs of the Fugo campaign arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly. In late November 1944, a balloon was spotted floating over the forests of Oregon. Local residents reported seeing a massive, paper-covered sphere hovering silently in the sky. Some dismissed it as a weather anomaly, a natural phenomenon. But the U.S. Army soon confirmed the truth: these were Japanese weapons, designed to strike terror and chaos on American soil. The initial reaction in Washington, D.C., was disbelief. How could Japan, thousands of miles away and on the brink of collapse, manage to send bombs across the Pacific? And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Balloons equipped with explosive devices were drifting over the forests and plains of the Pacific Northwest. Military intelligence quickly moved to investigate and track the phenomenon, but it was a daunting task. The balloons were small targets in an enormous sky, traveling thousands of miles without leaving a trace until they touched land. The mechanics of terror. The Japanese military intended the Fugo campaign to cause widespread fires in America's vast forests. The Pacific Northwest, with its dense coniferous forests, seemed the perfect target. A single incendiary device could spark a fire that, unattended, might rage for days. Each balloon was equipped with a self-righting system, allowing it to rise and fall with temperature changes, ensuring it remained aloft in the jet stream. Sandbags were released periodically to maintain altitude, and the fuse for the incendiary devices was designed to detonate after a calculated number of hours, time to land in North American forests. The plan was audacious. Even if only a fraction of the 9,300 balloons landed, the psychological effect alone could strain resources. The U.S. military would have to deploy personnel to monitor forests, prepare firefighting teams, and patrol remote areas, a diversion of manpower from the Pacific theater, exactly what Japan hoped to achieve. The first casualties. While many balloons fell harmlessly into the ocean or uninhabited areas, some caused tragic consequences. On May 5, 1945, in the state of Oregon, a group of picnickers stumbled upon a Fugo balloon in the woods. As they approached, one of the anti-personnel devices detonated. 6 civilians, 5 children and a minister, were killed. It was the only known instance of fatalities directly caused by the Fugo campaign on American soil. The event shocked the nation. While Japanese forces were thousands of miles away, their reach had extended into the American homeland in a lethal and unexpected way. Military officials realized that these weapons, though individually small, represented a new kind of warfare: psychological, invisible, and unpredictable. Government response: U.S. authorities moved swiftly to contain both the physical and psychological impact of the balloons. Media outlets were instructed not to report sightings. Articles describing the balloons and their potential effects were suppressed. The reasoning was clear: public awareness could create panic, inspire copycat fear, or give the Japanese feedback on the effectiveness of their campaign. Local communities were warned in secret, but the public largely remained unaware. The U.S. Forest Service, meanwhile, increased patrols in remote areas. Rangers were trained to spot incendiary devices and remove them safely. Firefighting units were put on high alert. Entire stretches of forest were monitored for unusual smoke, unusual fires, or remnants of the Japanese balloons. Tracking the balloons was nearly impossible. With no engines, they were entirely at the mercy of the jet stream, which at times moved at 100 miles per hour. Military meteorologists studied wind patterns, trying to predict likely landing zones. Reports of sightings, strange fires, and unexploded bombs were meticulously logged. Engineers analyzed fragments of the balloons to determine composition, materials, and fuse mechanisms. One recovered balloon revealed bamboo framing and paper covering, with a fuse timer triggered by altitude sensors. Experts marveled at the sophistication: a weapon that could cross an ocean without a pilot, guided by nothing but nature. The intelligence gleaned from these discoveries fed into broader Allied strategies. Analysts now understood that Japan, despite dwindling resources, could still project influence across vast distances using ingenuity and minimal cost. The human element: in Oregon, Washington, and other states along the West Coast, civilians reported eerie experiences. Farmers saw large white orbs drifting silently above their fields at dawn. Forest rangers discovered charred remains of balloons, some still smoking from incendiary devices. Letters and diaries from the time reveal the psychological strain. Families worried about invisible threats from the sky. Children were told not to touch strange objects in the woods. Adults moved cautiously, scanning the skies during hikes and forest work. The Fugo campaign was as much about terror as destruction. Even when bombs failed to ignite forests or cause fatalities, the uncertainty and fear it generated achieved part of Japan's strategic objective. The scale of the campaign: between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched approximately 9,300 balloons. Of these, U.S. military records estimate that roughly 300 reached the continental United States. Others were found in Alaska, Canada, and the Pacific Islands. Most caused little damage, landing in uninhabited areas, forests, or the ocean. Yet the campaign demonstrated Japan's ability to innovate under extreme pressure. Every balloon required careful construction, precise calculations, and an understanding of the high-altitude winds over the Pacific. Each launch represented a significant investment for a nation struggling under blockade, bombing raids, and resource scarcity. It was a weapon born of desperation, a last-ditch attempt to strike the enemy homeland, far from traditional battlefields. The psychological campaign: the Fugo campaign, was remarkable not for its physical impact, but for its psychological warfare. Every report of a balloon floating silently across the sky, every unexplained fire in the forest, and every discovered device added to a growing sense of unease. Officials feared mass panic. Government warnings were careful, measured, and secretive. Forest rangers became both watchmen and soldiers, patrolling forests armed with axes and knowledge rather than rifles. Yet the Americans adapted quickly. Communities were trained to respond efficiently. Fire suppression protocols were improved. And perhaps most importantly, the secrecy surrounding the campaign ensured that Japan never received confirmation of success. The enemy could not know if their campaign was working, a critical blow to morale and planning in Tokyo. Engineering ingenuity: the balloons themselves were marvels of engineering. The paper used was a mixture of mulberry bark and washi paper, chosen for durability and lightness. Bamboo framing allowed flexibility during ascent and descent. The hydrogen gas was produced in Japan's factories under increasingly difficult wartime conditions. Filling and launching thousands of balloons required precision, skill, and coordination, often in secret mountainous valleys to avoid Allied reconnaissance. Altimeters, sandbags, and fuse mechanisms demonstrated remarkable understanding of meteorology and timing. Some balloons traveled for more than 100 hours before reaching North America, a journey that few conventional weapons could attempt without a human pilot. The threat that almost was: despite its ingenuity, the Fugo campaign never achieved the strategic devastation Japan hoped for. The majority of balloons landed harmlessly. Fires were quickly contained, and fatalities were extremely limited. The single tragic incident in Oregon remains the only known lethal event in the continental U.S. But the campaign forced the U.S. to divert resources, military, civilian, and logistical, to counter an invisible, unpredictable enemy. It demonstrated that even a failing nation could strike fear and disruption across oceans with minimal resources. Escalation across the Pacific. As winter of 1944 deepened into 1945, the Fugo campaign intensified. Each launch from the Japanese home islands carried the hope of devastation thousands of miles away. The balloons drifted silently across the Pacific, invisible to radar, undetectable from the air, relying entirely on the jet stream. The U.S. military, however, began to systematically document sightings and landings. Civilian reports, Ranger logs, and the occasional detonation provided critical intelligence. Every recovered fragment of bamboo or paper offered clues to the Japanese design. Analysts began to map trajectories, predicting likely landing zones in the Pacific Northwest with increasing accuracy. A forest ranger's nightmare. In the dense forests of Oregon, a ranger named Hiram W. Redthornall patrolled the slopes of the Cascade Mountains. By early 1945, he had encountered multiple balloon remnants, tattered paper, charred bamboo, and scattered incendiary devices. Each discovery was a silent reminder of the war thousands of miles away. Redthornall recalled in later interviews the unease that gripped him and his colleagues. "We knew something was coming, but we couldn't see it until it landed. The first time I saw one, it was just a white sphere, floating there like a ghost. You knew it was dangerous, but you couldn't touch it. And yet, every day, we walked through forests knowing the enemy had reached our soil." His experience reflects the psychological terror Japan intended: the enemy's reach into the homeland, invisible but deadly. Military coordination and countermeasures. The U.S. Army quickly coordinated with the Forest Service, local police, and civil defense units to develop protocols for balloon sightings. Firefighting brigades were stationed in potential landing zones. Reports of floating objects were logged meticulously, and balloon fragments were collected and analyzed. The military also suppressed media coverage to prevent widespread panic. Newspapers in the Pacific Northwest were ordered not to print stories about the balloons. Civilians were warned quietly, without revealing the full scale of the threat. This secrecy was crucial. The Japanese military monitored American newspapers for reports of balloon landings. If Japan had received evidence of damage or casualties, it could have influenced the frequency and targeting of further launches. Technical evolution of the Fugo. Japan's engineers, aware of the campaign's potential and limitations, continually refined the design of the balloons. Altitude control mechanisms were improved to increase flight stability. Fuse timers were adjusted for longer durations, maximizing the chance of the balloons reaching forested regions of North America. Sandbag release systems were fine-tuned to maintain consistent altitude in changing wind conditions. By February 1945, launches became more frequent and sophisticated. Analysts in Tokyo hoped that with persistence, the balloons would spark large-scale fires, disrupt industry, and create fear among civilians. Encounters and incidents. Most balloons landed harmlessly, yet a few caused alarm and destruction. In late February 1945, a farmer discovered a half-burned balloon in his wheat field. The incendiary devices had failed to ignite fully, but the remnants were analyzed by local authorities. Military intelligence confirmed the balloon's Japanese origin, further validating the campaign's reach. In another incident, a balloon drifted into a remote logging camp in Oregon. Sparks from the incendiary devices set fire to a small section of forest, extinguished quickly by vigilant rangers. These incidents highlighted the danger and unpredictability of the balloons. Minor mistakes in timing or fuse mechanisms could mean life or death for anyone in proximity. Civilian experiences. Letters and diaries from the era provide a human perspective on the campaign. One Oregon family wrote, "The children saw a huge white balloon drifting over the pine trees. They were frightened, saying it looked like the sky was falling. We didn't know what it was at first. Only later did we learn it was a weapon sent all the way from Japan." Another civilian recalled seeing a balloon in the early morning mist, floating silently over a farm. It was eerily still. No sound, no engines. Just a strange white shape that seemed out of place in our sky. We didn't touch it, of course, but the fear was real. You felt like the war had reached your front yard without a single shot being fired. These testimonies underscore Japan's psychological objective: to make Americans feel the war was not distant, but immediate. The only fatal event, despite the thousands of balloons launched, the only known fatalities occurred in Oregon on May 5, 1945. A minister named Reverend Archie Mitchell, traveling with his wife and 5 Sunday school children, stumbled upon a balloon in a remote forest. Mistaking it for a downed weather balloon, they approached. An anti-personnel device detonated, killing all 6. This tragic incident became a symbol of the Fugo campaign's danger, though the US government did not publicize it widely to prevent further panic or giving feedback to Japan. Military analysis of Japanese strategy. US military intelligence analyzed the campaign and noted several key points. Resource efficiency: the balloons required minimal material and manpower compared to traditional bombing campaigns. Psychological impact: even failed balloons caused fear and diverted military resources. Technological ingenuity: Japan's ability to use the jet stream and altitude-controlled hydrogen balloons demonstrated creative problem-solving under extreme constraints. Analysts concluded that while the campaign failed to achieve strategic devastation, it was a remarkable example of asymmetric warfare, achieving psychological effect with minimal physical impact. Adaptation and countermeasures: by early 1945, US authorities developed effective response protocols. Any balloon sighting was reported immediately to the Army and Civil Defense. Ranger patrols were increased in forests. Fire suppression techniques were improved, including water transport via trucks and manual firefighting crews. Public awareness was controlled carefully to prevent panic, while still ensuring citizens did not handle unexploded devices. These measures significantly reduced casualties and property damage, highlighting the importance of preparedness and coordinated response. The scale of the threat: despite technological refinement and relentless launches, the balloons were far from foolproof. Of the 9,300 balloons launched, estimates suggest 300 reached the continental United States. Others landed in Alaska, Canada, and Pacific Islands. Many failed over the open ocean or were destroyed in storms. While the majority caused no damage, the campaign's psychological and resource-draining effects were undeniable. US troops and civilian agencies had to remain vigilant across a vast, rugged region, stretching manpower in a time of war. Japan's perspective: in Tokyo, military planners were desperate. By late 1944, Japan's cities were being bombed, industrial output was collapsing, and supply lines were cut. Conventional attacks on the United States were impossible. The Fugo campaign was a last-ditch effort to strike the enemy homeland. Reports indicated optimism in Japanese high command that the balloons could ignite massive forest fires, disrupt agricultural production, cause civilian casualties and fear. However, most planners underestimated the resilience and adaptability of the US military and civilians, who rapidly implemented countermeasures and prevented large-scale damage. Technical failures and lessons learned: many balloons failed due to storms tearing apart the paper shells, fuse malfunctions, leading to premature detonation or failure to ignite, jet stream variability, causing miscalculations in landing zones. These failures limited the campaign's effectiveness, yet each balloon remained a test of Japanese ingenuity. Despite these setbacks, the campaign provided Japan with valuable lessons in long-range, unmanned weaponry, influencing post-war missile and balloon experiments. The human story: the Fugo campaign also left a human imprint on the United States. Rangers who patrolled forests in winter, often in snow and freezing temperatures, became the first line of defense against invisible bombs. Civilians lived with the anxiety of unexplained objects drifting into their communities. Engineers and analysts worked tirelessly to understand enemy technology and prevent casualties. The campaign was not just a military challenge, it was a test of resilience, adaptation, and vigilance on the home front. Northern frontiers: Canada and Alaska. While most of the Fugo balloons were aimed at the continental United States, some strayed northward, carried by the jet stream into Canada and Alaska. In British Columbia, local residents reported seeing strange white orbs drifting silently over dense pine forests. Logging camps in remote valleys experienced minor fires from the incendiary devices, though none resulted in casualties. Military reports emphasized the psychological impact. Workers in isolated camps, already accustomed to the hardships of wilderness life, were now aware that enemy weapons could reach them despite thousands of miles of ocean separating them from the Japanese homeland. In Alaska, the challenge was even more extreme. Remote villages and outposts reported balloons landing in snow-covered forests, where incendiary devices either failed due to moisture or ignited small patches of scrubland before being extinguished by melting snow. These northern encounters underscored a critical limitation of the Fugo campaign. Environmental factors such as rain, snow, and humidity dramatically reduced the effectiveness of the incendiary payloads. Civil defense and intelligence operations. By early 1945, the U.S. Army had developed a comprehensive response network to counter the balloon threat. This network included civil defense teams. Local volunteers were trained to report balloon sightings and avoid disturbing the devices. Forest Service coordination. Rangers patrolled suspected landing areas and removed unexploded devices safely. Military intelligence. Each recovered balloon fragment was analyzed to understand Japanese design and improve predictive modeling. The intelligence work was meticulous. Engineers documented fuse mechanisms, altimeter systems, and sandbag release timing. Meteorologists tracked jet stream patterns to anticipate likely landing zones. Each balloon became a learning opportunity, providing insights into Japan's technological capabilities. One officer involved in the analysis later wrote, "Every fragment we recovered was a testament to the ingenuity and desperation of our enemy. They had reached across the Pacific with nothing but paper, bamboo, and hydrogen. It forced us to rethink the nature of warfare on the home front." Encounters with civilians. Across the Pacific Northwest, civilians occasionally stumbled upon balloon devices. Many were unaware of the danger. Families hiking in forests, children playing near logging camps, and farmers tending fields encountered remnants or fully intact devices. In Oregon, one family recounted discovering a balloon in a meadow. The children approached, curious about the strange white object. Their father, recognizing the potential threat, immediately called local authorities. The Army later removed the device and examined it. Such encounters reinforced the need for public secrecy. The Japanese could gauge the success of their campaign based on media reports. Another Oregon farmer reported, "I saw it floating low in the morning mist, just hovering over my field. It was silent. I had no idea what it was at first. Later, when I learned it was a Japanese bomb, I realized how close the war had come to my home." The cumulative effect of these encounters, though often harmless, contributed to a pervasive sense of unease and reinforced the campaign's psychological objective. The role of the Forest Service. The U.S. Forest Service played a crucial role in countering the Fugo campaign. Rangers were trained to identify balloon materials, disarm incendiary devices, and report findings to military authorities. Ranger Hiram W. Red O'Donnell described the conditions. "We were walking through snow, rain, mud, sometimes all in the same day, searching for these things. They were silent, almost ghost-like. You'd see a white orb drifting through the trees, and you knew it was dangerous, but you couldn't see any fuse burning. Every step felt like a test of nerves." Forest rangers also documented the frequency, locations, and characteristics of the balloons, providing vital intelligence to the military. Their work not only prevented fires and injuries but also contributed to a broader understanding of enemy innovation. Japan's final months of the campaign. As spring approached in 1945, the effectiveness of the Fugo campaign began to wane. Many balloons were destroyed or neutralized by U.S. patrols. The jet stream's variability caused balloons to drift off course or land harmlessly in the ocean. Japan's resources were diminishing rapidly due to sustained Allied bombing and naval blockades, limiting the number of launches. Despite these limitations, Japanese planners persisted, hoping that sheer numbers could still yield results. Between March and April 1945, hundreds more balloons were launched, some making it to forests in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Most caused minor fires, quickly extinguished. The campaign's psychological impact persisted, even as the physical threat declined. Civilians and rangers remained vigilant, aware that any balloon could carry deadly payloads. The only known fatality, the tragic incident in Oregon, where 6 civilians were killed by an anti-personnel device, remained the sole fatality in the continental U.S. This event became a stark reminder of the potential danger, even as the overall campaign's effectiveness was limited. Authorities kept the incident largely secret, understanding that public knowledge could increase panic, encourage unnecessary risk-taking by civilians, provide Japan with feedback about the campaign's lethality. By controlling information, the U.S. prevented Japan from assessing the psychological impact fully, effectively blunting one of the campaign's main objectives. Analyzing enemy ingenuity. The Fugo campaign revealed much about Japan's approach to warfare in the final months of World War II. Resourcefulness. Using paper, bamboo, and hydrogen, Japan created a trans-Pacific weapon with minimal material cost. Innovation. Balloons were engineered with sophisticated altitude control mechanisms and fuse timers. Psychological strategy. The campaign aimed to terrorize civilians and force the U.S. to divert resources, demonstrating a broader understanding of asymmetric warfare. Despite these achievements, the campaign also illustrated the limitations of ingenuity under extreme pressure. Environmental factors, technological failures, and U.S. countermeasures minimized both damage and psychological impact. Public awareness and secrecy. The U.S. government's decision to suppress media coverage was critical. Reports of balloons were kept out of newspapers. Civilians were given minimal instructions on safety. The strategy worked, panic was avoided, and Japan received no feedback on the campaign's effectiveness. In later analyses, historians concluded that this secrecy was as vital to countering the Fugo campaign as the Forest Service's physical efforts. By limiting knowledge, the U.S. nullified one of Japan's main strategic goals, spreading fear and uncertainty across American society. Personal accounts of balloon encounters throughout the Pacific Northwest, first-hand accounts reveal the tension and fear caused by the balloons. A logging crew in Washington discovered a balloon tangled in trees, fuses still active. They carefully notified authorities, preventing potential injury. Farmers in Oregon reported seeing balloons drift over their homes at dawn, ghost-like against the early light. School children recounted spotting strange white objects in the sky, unaware of the deadly devices within. These stories illustrate the human side of the campaign, ordinary citizens, far from battlefields, confronted with the reach of modern warfare. Final months and conclusion of the campaign. By April 1945, the Fugo campaign effectively ended. Japan's ability to launch balloons diminished due to Allied air raids destroying factories and launch sites. Resource scarcity limiting hydrogen production. Increasingly efficient U.S. countermeasures, including forest patrols, intelligence collection, and civil defense. Though the campaign caused few physical casualties, it left a lasting impression on both American civilians and military strategists. It demonstrated the potential of long-range, unmanned weapons and the strategic value of psychological warfare. Aftermath and reflection. By April 1945, the Fugo campaign had effectively run its course. Japan's launch capability had been degraded by relentless Allied bombing raids, shortages of materials, and the increasing collapse of the Japanese war economy. Yet, the story of the balloon bombs remained a unique and chilling footnote in the history of World War II, a campaign that reached across the Pacific, directly threatening the American homeland and forcing the U.S. to mobilize defensive measures far from the front lines. While the campaign caused only a single known fatality, the psychological impact on civilians, rangers, and local authorities was substantial. People had confronted the idea that war could reach their doorstep in the form of silent, invisible objects drifting through the sky. It was, in essence, a precursor to modern ideas of long-range unmanned weaponry and psychological warfare. Impact on civil defense. The Fugo campaign left an indelible mark on the U.S. civil defense system. Military planners and local authorities used the experience to develop strategies for rapid response to unexpected threats. Civilian vigilance became a priority. Communities in the Pacific Northwest learned how to report unusual objects safely. Coordination between federal agencies, state authorities, and local rangers proved critical. Emergency protocols for unexploded devices, including containment and destruction, were formalized. Hiram W. Red the Donnell, the Oregon Ranger who had patrolled forests throughout the campaign, later reflected, "The balloons may have been mostly harmless, but the fear they caused trained us in ways we never anticipated. It prepared us for threats that were both real and invisible." This adaptation highlighted the value of preparedness, a lesson that resonated with military and civilian agencies well beyond the end of World War II. Analysis of Japanese strategy. Historians analyzing the campaign have emphasized several points. Resource efficiency. Japan achieved a trans-Pacific reach with minimal materials, a remarkable feat considering their dwindling resources in 1945. Innovation under constraint. Engineers devised altitude control mechanisms, sandbag releases, and fuse systems that could survive long transoceanic flights. Psychological warfare, the primary objective, instilling fear and uncertainty, demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of the non-physical effects of war. Despite these innovations, Japan failed to achieve strategic success. Environmental factors, U.S. countermeasures, and sheer luck meant that the campaign caused negligible physical damage. The single fatality, tragic as it was, remained the only direct loss of life in the continental U.S. Lessons in asymmetric warfare. The Fugo campaign remains a remarkable study in asymmetric warfare. Facing overwhelming military superiority from the Allies, Japan sought to exploit geography, leveraging the jet stream to deliver weapons over 5,000 miles. Surprise, utilizing an unseen, silent method of attack. Psychology, targeting civilian fear and forcing resource diversion. Although the campaign ultimately failed in its physical objectives, it succeeded in demonstrating that innovation and ingenuity can create strategic dilemmas even for a superior opponent. Civilian stories and human perspective across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Civilians who encountered balloon devices remembered the strangeness and terror of the experience. A logging camp worker in Washington recounted seeing a balloon descend into a clearing. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. Floating there, silent, enormous in the morning light. We stayed back, knowing it could explode at any moment. It was a reminder that the war wasn't just across the ocean, it had found a way to touch us here. In rural Oregon, children reported seeing white balloons drifting silently over their farms. Parents warned them to avoid the objects, creating a climate of tension and vigilance that permeated daily life. Letters from school teachers, firefighters, and rangers detail the nervous anticipation of any unusual sound or movement in the forest. The campaign achieved its psychological aim: awareness, fear, and the constant possibility of danger in an otherwise safe homeland. The final months of the war, as Allied forces advanced steadily in Europe and the Pacific, Japan's capacity for innovation was severely constrained. Balloon launches became sporadic by April 1945, and the campaign faded quietly from operational significance. Balloon failures increased as fewer hydrogen balloons could be produced. Meteorological unpredictability led many balloons to fall harmlessly into the Pacific Ocean. Civilian vigilance and Forest Service coordination ensured that fires were extinguished quickly and casualties remained minimal. By the time Japan surrendered in August 1945, the Fugo campaign had left a legacy of innovation, fear, and resilience, a war waged across continents, not only with bombs but with ingenious psychological and technical strategy. Historical significance: the Fugo campaign, though minor in terms of physical destruction, provides a compelling lens into several aspects of World War II. Technological ingenuity: Japan's ability to reach North America with paper balloons demonstrates remarkable creativity in the face of material scarcity. Home front defense: the U.S. response illustrated the importance of civilian-military coordination, public awareness, and emergency preparedness. Psychological warfare: even minor weapons can influence the enemy through fear, uncertainty, and distraction. Asymmetric tactics: a small, resource-constrained opponent can create strategic dilemmas for a superior adversary through innovation. Historians note that while the balloons caused minimal casualties, they had lasting influence on U.S. emergency preparedness, military intelligence operations, and even post-war missile development research. The human element: perhaps most importantly, the Fugo campaign highlights the human cost and human experience of distant wars, rangers patrolling snow and rain, facing invisible weapons. Civilians confronted with fear in everyday life, children learning to avoid mysterious floating objects. Engineers and intelligence officers analyzing fragments to prevent disaster. The campaign reminds us that warfare reaches beyond battlefields, it touches the daily lives of ordinary people and tests resilience in unexpected ways. Hiram W. O'Donnell summarized this human element succinctly: it was silent, invisible, and deadly only in imagination for most of us. But it changed how we thought about the war. You realized it wasn't just over there, it could come here in ways you never expected. Final reflections: the Fugo campaign remains a unique chapter in World War II history. Japan's innovative balloon bombs reached across the Pacific, exploiting nature, technology, and psychology to create fear on the American home front. Though largely unsuccessful in physical terms, the campaign forced the U.S. to develop rapid response protocols, tested the resilience and adaptability of civilians and rangers, highlighted the potential of unmanned weapons and long-range delivery systems, demonstrated how ingenuity and creativity can challenge a superior opponent, even when resources are scarce. In the end, the Fugo campaign was a war of minds and machines, where distance and imagination became weapons. It stands as a testament to human innovation, courage, and the unexpected ways war can touch lives thousands of miles from the front lines. The Fugo campaign may not be as famous as D-Day or the Pacific naval battles, but it remains a fascinating example of ingenuity, fear, and resilience, a war that stretched across the Pacific, challenging both the minds and courage of those who faced it on the home front.